Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Rosh Hashana Daf contains a Mishnah, finishes the third parak, and begins the fourth with the Mishnah that introduces the fourth parak. The Daf will touch on the topic of whether somebody who's blowing shofar has to have kavana to be motzi other people with his blowing. The Mishnah will note for us a couple of sources in Psukim that it's not the shofar that saves us, but it's our looking towards the Kadosh Baruch Hu and our trust in Him. The Gemara will then introduce a brisa that teaches who is chayev in tekiyas shofar and who can be motzi others. The Gemara will sidestep into the sugya of how people can be motzi others with a bracha, what types of brachos can a person be motzi others with. That'll end the parak. And the next parak will begin with the topic of what happens when Rosh Hashana falls down on Shabbos. Do we do tekiyas shofar or not? And why or why not? And which towns? So let's begin. The Gemara quotes the opinion of Reb Zera, who says that the person who's blowing shofar has to have kavana to be motzi other people. The Gemara brings two proofs that he does not. The first proof, the Gemara says, is from a Mishnah, which we've seen quoted quite a few times in the last few daf. Somebody's passing near a shul, or he lives near a shul, and he hears tekiyas shofar, or he hears kriyas megillah through the window. As long as the person who's hearing has kavanah to be yotza, he is yotza. The Gemara's question is that the person who's blowing did not have kavanah to be motzi him, so how could he be yotza? So the Gemara answers that's talking about with a shliach tzibor, the one who's appointed to blow for the entire shul is blowing for the shul. In a situation like that, he has kavanah that anybody who hears who wants to be yotza should be yotza, so that counts as kavanah. Second source, second question, is from a brisa that says that the person who's blowing and the person who's hearing both have to have kavana. If they both have kavana, then the person who's hearing is yotza. If one of them has kavana, not the other, he's not yotza. The Gemara says, what type of kavana is implied here? The implication is that it's the kavana of the person who's blowing has to have the same type of kavana as the person who's hearing. Meaning to say, just like the person who's hearing only has to have kavana that he himself should be yotza, the person who's blowing also only has to have kavana that he himself should be yotza. That seems to imply, says the Gemara, does not have to have kavana to be motzi the other person. So why would we say then, the Rebbe Zera says, you do have to have kavana to be motzi the other person? The Gemara answers that it's actually a machlokas tanayim, and the Gemara quotes a brisa that brings this opinion plus another opinion. So the brisa says somebody who's blowing and the one who's hearing only has to have kavana. They each have to have kavana that they themselves should be yotzi. That's the opinion of this brisa. We've seen that does not fit with Rabbi Zera. But then Rabbi Yasi says that only applies to a shliach tzibor who doesn't have to have special kavana to be motzi people. It's automatic. But an individual who's blowing for another individual has to have kavana to be motzi him, and that fits very neatly with Rabbi Zera's statement. Okay, now we begin a Mishnah. The Mishnah brings two sources, two psukim in which Klal Yisrael were saved by something, and the Gemara says it's not that they were saved by the thing, but they were saved by looking up towards the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the first one is from the Chemes Amalek, where Klal Yisrael went to war with Amalek, and in the Parshas Beshalach, and there it says that whenever Moshe lifted his hands, Klal Yisrael were winning. Whenever he dropped his hands, Klal Yisrael were losing. The Mishnah says Moshe's hands did not do war, they did not break war, but Klal Yisrael, by looking at his hands, seeing his hands up, looked past his hands to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and as long as they focused and they made their hearts subservient to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is when they were winning at the war. Otherwise, they were falling in war. Same thing applies to the snake, the Nachash Nachoshes. Klal Yisrael were being bitten by snakes, and Moshe put a copper snake on top of a pole. And people who looked at the snake were survived. They were cured from the snake bite. Other people dropped. Again, the Mishnah says it's not that they were looking at the snake to heal themselves, but they were looking past it to Avim Sheba Shamayim, their father in Shamayim, and that caused them to survive. And that is the similar effect of the shofar. So now the Gemara, the end of the Mishnah says who is chayev in the mitzvah of shofar and who can be motzi others. So it says a cheresh shota v'katan, that is a deaf mute who in the days of Chazal did not have any das because he cannot learn anything, as well as a shota and a person who was not sane, who was not functional, and a katan, a child. All these people cannot be motzi others. They cannot blow their shofar in order to fulfill other people. They do not have the das to be motzi others. Says the Mishnah, the rule is anybody who's chayev can be motzi others. Anybody who's not chayev cannot be motzi others. The Gemara begins by introducing a brisa that discusses the same subject: who is chayev in tekiyas shofar and who can be motzi others. So it begins by saying everybody is chayev in tekiyas shofar, kohanim, leviim, and yisraelim. The Gemara will ask, what is the chiddush of those three? Next, the brisa adds a gerim, a convert is chayev, avodim that are freed, a slave is chayev, that a freed slave is chayiv. It does not apply to one who is still a slave, because he is only chayiv in mitzvahs like an isha, and an isha is not chayiv in tkiyah shofar, because it's a mitzvah saseh daraisa shahazman groma. It is a time-bound mitzvah that women are parted from. Next, the Brisa says a tumtum and androgynous, they are both chayiv. A tumtum is one whose gender is indeterminate because there is a layer of flesh covering his simanim or her simanim. We don't know what he or she is. It's one or the other, either he or she. We just don't know which one. Different tumtumim could be different things. We don't know which, like, what is happening there. An androgynous, though, is somebody who has both male and female organs. That is someone who is one or the other, or both, or neither. We don't know what their halacha is either. It remains a suffix. And the last thing the Mishnah mentions is somebody who is a half-freed eved. An eved who is freed halfway. He's half free, and he's half an eved. These are all chayiv. Now, says the Brisa further, a tumtum, one whose gender is indeterminate, it's one or the other, but it's indeterminate, cannot be mitzi anybody else. Not himself or herself, and not another tumtum, for the simple reason that if it's a woman, if this one is a woman, if the blower is a woman, and the other tumtum that she's trying to be mitzi is a male, then you have somebody who's not chayiv trying to be mitzi, somebody who is chayiv. You can't do that. And we don't know, just because different tumtumim can be different things. However, an androgynous can be mitzi another androgynous. It's because whatever the halacha of androgynuses are, it applies to all of them. Somebody who has both male and female organs, it applies to all of them. So if they're all women, then there's no problem. If they're all men, there's also no problem. There's no situation in which one is a woman and is trying to be mitzi a man. Now, an androgynous, though, cannot be mitzi a full-fledged man, because she may have the halacha of a woman and cannot be mitzi a man because she does not have the same chiyuv, the same obligation. Now, somebody who's half eved and half freed, a person like that cannot be mitzi anybody, not other people in a similar situation, and not people who are fully freed, for the simple reason that his half eved is not chayiv, and that half eved is blowing the shofar and doing part of it for the freed person, or even for another half eved is blowing it for the part which is chayiv, which is the half ben chorin. That would not be acceptable at all. Alright, now the Gemara begins, and the Gemara wants to analyze this phrase by phrase. And where it says, first of all, what is the Chiddush in saying that Kohanim, Levim, and Yisrael are chayiv into Tkiyas Shofar? Of course they are. If they're not chayiv, then who is? The Gemara says the Chiddush here is one of two, is that Kohanim are chayiv, or possibly Kohanim and Yisrael. The Gemara offers two explanations. The Gemara says, first of all, the Chiddush says Kohanim are chayiv. You would have thought Kohanim are not chayiv. Why? Because the Torah says that Rosh Hashana should be a Yom Teruah, it should be the day of blowing, which seems to imply that this is the only day of blowing, which means the Torah is talking to somebody who does not have another day of blowing. That's not true for Kohanim. Kohanim have an obligation to blow trumpets in the Beis HaMikdash, so this is not their day of blowing, so you would think the Torah is not talking to them. And therefore, the Mishnah comes to tell us that no, the Torah is talking to them as well. They also have an obligation to hear Tkiyas Shofar. Says Gemara that can't be, because that's talking about blowing trumpets, and we're talking about blowing shofars. I would not think that the commandment to blow shofar and do a day of blowing doesn't apply to them, just because they blow trumpets. It's a different instrument. One has nothing to do with the other. Gemara says no, so there's a different reason, and that's because there's a link between Tkiyas Shofar of Rosh Hashana and Tkiyas Shofar of Yom Kippur of Yovel. And we say that the halachas that apply to one apply to the other. Kohanim and Levim do not have the same halachas of Yovel as Yisraelim. The Gemara quotes a Mishnah to show that. The Mishnah says Kohanim, Levim can sell forever and redeem forever. There's a long discussion in the Rishonim what the correct gears over here is. Rashi explains that they do not have all the halachos of Shmitas, Karkois, and Yovel. They don't have the halachos that a field, a property that they bought, that Rashi specifies that they were makdish, that they can't redeem certain times, they can only redeem other times. They don't have those halachas, they're different for Kohanim and Levim. Therefore, you may think that they are not included in the halacha of Tkiyas Shofar of Rosh Hashana because they do not have all the halachas of Yovel. And the Mishnah comes to teach you that they do have all of those halachos and they are chayiv in Tkiyas Shofar of Rosh Hashana. Next, the Gemara says somebody who is half eved and half freed cannot be motzi others, not a person who is fully obligated, not a person who is also half eved and half freed. The more question is, what about himself? Can he be motzi himself? So Rav Huna says, yes, he can be motzi himself. Rav Nachman asks, why should that be? His half that's eved is being motzi, his half that's freed. And the Gemara says, you're right. What Rav Huna actually said was that he cannot be motzi himself for that reason. The only way he could be Yosef Shofar is if somebody who's full obligated, a full ben chorin, is motzi. And the Gemara brings a brisa which spells this out clearly, that exact halacha. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to the topic of being motzi other people in a bracha. So we've seen in our Mishnah that you can only be motzi someone if you are obligated in that thing yourself, something that you're obligated in, you could be motzi others. If you're not obligated, you cannot. What about somebody who's already fulfilled the mitzvah and no longer has the obligation? So the Gemara says you can still be motzi other people because we have a rule called Kol Yisrael Arevim Zel is that. The fact that another Jew in a similar status to you is obligated and makes you still have some obligation as well. You're not free of your obligation as long as there's somebody out there who hasn't, and therefore who has not fulfilled his obligation, therefore you can do it for him. Says Gemara, this applies to everything, even to brachos. You can make a bracha for somebody even if you already said the bracha, but it doesn't apply to birchas hanehenin, a bracha which is not an obligation. A bracha which is you're eating something, so you're enjoying your food, you already said the bracha, you cannot be motzi somebody else in that bracha on his food because there's no obligation for him to eat, so there's no arvus. You're not an orev, you do not have part of the obligation that he has. He doesn't have an obligation to eat, he doesn't have to eat if he doesn't want to. The only type of bracha that you could be motzi somebody, and if you said the bracha already, is a birchas ha-mitzvah, birchas achiyev. You have an obligation to say it, and therefore he has the obligation to say it just like you do, and even if you said it already, his obligation applies to you as well. An example of that would be something like the bracha of Hallel or Megillah, or all these things, which is an obligation to say a bracha, which is a mitzvah. Kiddush, Havdalah, these things apply as well. Now the Gemara says, what about the bracha on bread and the bracha on wine? Specifically, the Gemara is referring to where it is a mitzvah. What would that be? So it would be the bracha of wine, Rarpi Agafen on Kiddush, and the bracha of matzah, the bracha of Hamoitzi Lechem and Arts on matzah. There, you're saying a bracha of Birchas Hanenin, but it's part of the mitzvah of Havdalah or Kiddush and Achilas Matzah. You got to say the bracha is part of the mitzvah. Here, you are obligated to eat it. You can't say, I don't want to eat it. I have the choice to not eat it. And somebody else who has the obligation also creates an obligation for you because of the rule of arvos. On the other hand, it's a berachas hanehenin. It's not a real berachas mitzvah, so it doesn't count as you could be married to him even if you already said the bracha or not. So Gemara brings two proofs. Gemara's first proof is Rav Ashi. He says we were in the house of our papi. He made kiddush for us and he said the bracha. And then when his worker came in, he made kiddush for him as well, even though he had said the bracha already, which seems to imply that a bracha like this is even though it's berachas hanehenin, because if it's part of a mitzvah, you could say the bracha for somebody else even if he said the bracha already. Next case, the Gemara brings a brisa that says a person should not give bread to his guests unless he's eating with them. But he is allowed to give bread to his children and to the people of his family. Now this gives the opposite implication that you can't be motzi others unless you yourself are obligated. Children and one's own family, he has an obligation even if others... He has no obligation to others, and that's because he has an obligation to be mechanech then. He has an obligation to educate them, and therefore he has an obligation to make sure that they do the mitzvah properly. It's part of their education, and he's responsible for the education of his family members, and that creates more of a chiyuv. This concludes the third parak of Masechus Rosh Hashana. Now we begin the fourth parak, which introduces the topic of blowing shofar on Shabbos. And Rosh Hashana falls on Shabbos. So the new parak begins with a Mishnah, which divides it into the times of the Beis HaMikdash, and nowadays when there is no Beis HaMikdash anymore. So the times of the Beis HaMikdash, says the Mishnah, they would only blow shofar on Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash. Everywhere else there is no Tekiyas shofar outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, what about now, today, when there's no Beis HaMikdash? So the Mishnah says as follows. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was Matake, and he created a rule that they would blow a shofar anywhere where there is a Beis Din. Any town that has a Beis Din, such as the Great Sanhedrin, that is where they would blow a shofar. Rabbi Eliezer says no. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takana was only in Yavne. Yavne is where the Sanhedrin moved, only in the place where the Great Sanhedrin is. And then the Mishnah makes the third statement that they said to him, Yavne and any other place that has a Beis Din. Now this sounds just like the first opinion, and the Gemara will explain what the difference is. So we have three opinions. The first one is that anywhere where there's a Beis Din. The second one is that only where there's a Sanhedrin. And the third one also says anywhere where there's a Beis Din. The Gemara will explain the difference. Now, there was another way in which Yerushalayim was greater than other cities, such as Yavne, even if it had a Sanhedrin, and that's in Yerushalayim. When the Sanhedrin was in Yerushalayim, there was a rule that not only did they blow shofar for Yerushalayim, but any town which was Samuch V'nira, any town which was close and could see Yerushalayim, also blew shofar as well, even if they did not have the Beis Din. Yavne, they only blew shofar in the Beis Din, that was the only place that shofar was blown. Alright, then the Gemara begins. The Gemara wants to know what is the source of this halacha that there's no Tekiyas shofar on Shabbos in most places. So the Gemara says, Reb Levi Bar Chama says, it's learned out from Psukim. The Torah in one place calls Rosh Hashanah Zichron Torah, Shabbos and Zichron Torah, a place to remember blowing, and another place calls it Yom Torah, a day of blowing. How do you explain that? The Gemara says one is when Rosh Hashanah falls on a weekday. The other is when Rosh Hashanah falls on a Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah falls on a weekday, you blow, so it's Yom Torah. Rosh Hashanah falls on a Shabbos, you just remember the blowing, you don't actually do it, that's a Zichron Torah. The Gemara has some problems with this. The Gemara says, according to that, the fact that we don't blow shofar on Shabbos would be a deoraisa. If it's a deoraisa, so why would they blow it in the Beis HaMikdash? The Torah says deoraisa not to blow shofar on Shabbos. That couldn't be. The other problem is, why shouldn't you blow shofar on Shabbos? Shofar is not a malacha. Why should there be a deoraisa halacha not to blow shofar on Shabbos? We have a brisa that says, Dibei Shmuel, that tekiyas shofar and taking bread out of the oven to peel it off the wall in one piece, that's called a chachma. It's a skill. It's not a malacha. It's not considered malacha. So why should it be on Shabbos? So the Gemara therefore gives a different explanation. The Gemara rejects those two limudim. The Gemara says, no, the source is midrabanan. And this is a famous Gemara. The Rabbanan said that everybody is obligated to tekiyas shofar. It's a widespread thing, but not everybody knows tekiyas shofar, and we're afraid that the person is going to take his shofar to a chacham to ask a shayla, to be taught how to blow or something along those lines, and he's going to end up carrying. And therefore the Chazal, Midrabanan, canceled. They said, do not blow shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. They canceled the mitzvah. They have power to do that. And the same thing applies to not taking a lulav and esrog on Shabbos and not reading the Megillah on Shabbos. That's the source of the halacha for all those three things. Okay, now the Gemara discusses the machlokes in the Mishnah about what to do once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So the Gemara says, is a brisa that says one time Rosh Hashanah fell on Shabbos and all the cities came to the main town, probably Yerushalayim, to hear tekiyas shofar. And Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai said to the Bnei Beseira, the leaders, should we blow for them? And they said to him, well, maybe we should judge. Maybe it's not proper to have everybody coming and hearing, because you're going to end up with people carrying if we allow this to go on. Everybody's coming, traveling, hearing. So he said to them, let's first blow, and then afterwards we will judge whether or not we should make such a rule. So they blew shofar, and then they said, okay, let's judge, let's decide. He said, no, we already blew shofar, and it was in Yavne. The Gemara says, you cannot start judging whether you did something correct already or not. So therefore we're not going to have this judgment here. Now the Gemara wants to know, what is the third opinion in the Mishnah different than the first opinion? The first one said any place that has a beis din we blow shofar nowadays, and the second one said only a place that has a beis din like Yavne, not just Yavne. Any place is Yavne and any other place that has a beis din. So the Gemara says the difference is if it has a temporary beis din, doesn't have a kavua, a fixed beis din of 23 people, just as a temporary one. So according to the first opinion, it has a beis din, and therefore you can do tekiyas shofar there. According to the second opinion, that doesn't count. It's got to have a real beis din like they had in Yavne. Otherwise, there's no.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.